Issues, a podcast where we do in-depth discussions on a single comic book. I am the legally distinct from an incredibly popular character host, Jonah Gregory.
And my name's Kieran Bennett, everyone's favorite winged cat.
And today we are doing a Patreon-suggested episode of The Unwritten. And this comic is by Mike Carey. And this is not a series I'd really heard of before it was suggested. So,
yeah, I had not actually heard of this one. Well, until it was suggested by patrons, I'd never had any intention of reading it. But I did have a copy in my house because my ex-girlfriend had bought the first volume for $1 from the library and then left it when she broke up with me. And I was like,
I see.
Never going to read this because why would I?
Yeah.
And then turns out I actually needed a copy.
Yes.
So
you didn't even have to pay that $1.
I didn't. I didn't have to pay that $1.
That's good.
It's the only good thing that's come out of us breaking up.
Well, there's always a silver lining. So, Kieran, have you been reading anything else lately?
Have I been reading anything else lately? Man, boy, let me tell you what I've been fucking reading lately.
Yeah.
I've been reading a little known comic known as One Piece.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. Because you said the Shonen Jump app actually is available in New Zealand.
It is. Oh, my God. And you know what? It's $2.
It's insane how cheap it is.
It's $2 a month. And yeah, so thanks to, I think we can say, good friend of the show, Kim Stonick, I was inspired to take on a reread of the entirety of One Piece.
Wow.
And so this entire last week, I've just been reading One Piece. I read all 88 volumes that I have on my shelf, and then I moved on to the Shonen Jump online service, and I read the other like 50 or so chapters that entailed. And so I finished chapter 930 the other day, and I'm now completely current on One Piece.
That's insane. I've been reading it off and on, as I've mentioned on the show a few times, and I'm still on like volume 20 or something. So I don't know what chapter that comes out to. I get distracted easily, and it's a lot of comic to get through, but I also have the Shonen Jump app. I couldn't have done it because I was sick for a couple of days. So I was able to sit down and just read like 25 volumes in like 2 days. I didn't have anything else to do. So, right. You know. Yeah. I was just, when Kim said she had read all of it, I was just like, how? There's so much of it. And it turns out, kids, the secret is crippling insomnia. So that's all you need to do is never sleep. Then you too can catch up on One Piece. I've actually been watching the anime with the kids, and they absolutely love it. Korra was super into it, and it gets sad in a few parts, and this is still super early on. So Sanji's backstory she was like, oh my God, my 8-year-old is like, do you ever feel like you have to cry but you can't? I'm like, wow, this show, huh? But it's very good.
Yeah, Sanji's backstory is real good.
So One Piece is still good. We still are going to eventually do some kind of special on One Piece, I'm sure. It's a requirement. I was the other thing I was reading was The Runaways, which has been suggested to me a few times. So I got the first volume
the
of
Marvel
that.
series?
Yeah, so I'm most of the way through the first volume. I was reading it the other night, but then, children. So I didn't actually get to finish it. You have to like stop what you're doing and like make them dinner and stuff like that. And, then you get distracted it's interesting so far, but, I don't know. I don't think it's fully grabbed me quite yet, but everyone says it's really good. So I'm trying to give it a fair shake. So, but, that's basically the only other thing I've read, because I was trying to get through this, and then, life is busy. So that's always a thing. So,
that is.
Yeah. So let's get into, The Unwritten. So Kieran, do you have any fun facts for us on this book?
So The Unwritten was, written by Mike Carey, and it actually is, if this sounds like something that appeals to you, it is actually finished. and is collected in 11 trade paperbacks. So it ran from October 2009 to January 2015. So, unlike some of the other stuff we review, this is actually a complete finished story. So written by Mike Carey, who is most well known for working on a lot of like X-Men and Lucifer and Hellblazer and things like that. He has also done, oddly enough, a biographical comic about Ozzy Osbourne and a fantasy comic about Pantera.
Okay.
So try and hunt those down. So he's probably most well known outside of comics for a novel titled The Girl with All the Gifts, which was actually adapted into a film later that year. I've never watched it or read it. By all accounts, very good. Also, according to Wikipedia, he apparently in 2006 wrote an erotic ghost story called Frost Flowers. What is erotic ghost fiction? I don't know, but I'm curious. The Unwritten was also drawn by Peter Gross, who has, honestly, he's just done The Unwritten. He's done The Unwritten and Lucifer with Mike Carey. That's pretty much it. As far as I can find. He's probably done other work. I mean, comic wikis aren't exactly like super comprehensive. They're not like the manga wikis, which are
insane.
Honestly, kind of insane. Yeah.
Like, you think comic fans are obsessive? Manga fans win that contest by a mile.
Goodness. Yeah.
So, but good on them. They make our job easier, so I'm not complaining. I'm giving them mad props.
Like if this was just a manga review podcast, it'd be so much easier. But no, apparently we got to do other comics.
Or, if there's something insanely popular like Watchmen, then someone has an entire website dedicated to everything, true. Which was nice. Yeah. All right, so we ready to jump into issue 1?
Yes, we shall.
Okay, so issue 1, we are introduced to the fantastical world of Tommy Taylor as the evil Count Ambrosio is about to play the 7th note on his golden trumpet. As Tommy dies turning Ambrosio to stone, his friend Peter plays the final note and the book ends. We then exit the book and see Tom Taylor signing an autograph in Tommy Taylor and the Golden Trumpet. We learn that Tom is currently running the convention circuit, making money off his disappeared father's series of fantasy books, which apparently has a main character based off of him. Which makes Tom rather popular with the fans, because they're like, you're the real life, this guy.
You're the real one.
Yeah. It's kind of like how Christopher Robin's dad used his name as that character and ruined his life.
Funny you should mention that, because there was actually an interview floating around with Mike Carey where he said, one of the biggest inspirations that I had for this was the fact that A.A. Milne ruined his son's life by putting him into this insanely popular series of children's books.
Right, exactly. And it's also weird to think that Disney owns your identity essentially, because your character was bought by a massive entertainment conglomerate. So back to the story. Tom goes to a Q&A session where he faces the regular questions about the series. And we also learn that he is very much not rich like he kind of is assumed to be. Yeah, so there's also a crazy guy who thinks he is Count Ambrosio, who confronts him occasionally. It sounds like this guy's come up to him a few times over the years. Yeah, there's
a very much like a, oh, it's you again kind of thing.
Yeah, and then a woman that has been studying Tommy Taylor academically asks a series of very uncomfortable questions and basically implies that Tom is not his father's son and that he's a fake person. The Q&A is, of course, cut short because of this whole fiasco. And the whole situation begins to spiral out of control, with fans worldwide feeling cheated by the revelation over the next few days. The woman from the Q&A, Lizzie Hexam, even visits Tom and tries to tell him to take control of the situation. Instead, he plans to flee to Tuscan coast, but before he can, he is struck on the head and kidnapped by the Count Ambrosia impersonator. Ambrosia tells Tom he's going to kill his whole ass with a nail bomb and starts live streaming the kidnapping to the world. The world's greatest Twitch stream is interrupted, however, when Lizzie shows up and unplugs the camera. After a brief tussle wherein Tommy manages to escape, Ambrosia is killed by the nail bomb and Tommy is knocked out by Lizzie. While he's unconscious, Lizzie shreds Tommy's clothes, makes it look like he was hit by the bomb, but suffered no injuries. As the issue closes, someone named Mr. Pullman promises to kill Tom. So what did you think of the Unwritten issue 1?
I will say first off, this did actually make me think about it, like if you were the Harry from Harry Potter, like if your name was like, Harold Bottram or something like that, and everyone thought that Harry Potter was based on you, fuck, your life would be miserable. Like, I cannot think of a more irritating existence.
Yes, there's like a New Zealand-based cult, shout out to New Zealand, who thinks Tommy Taylor's basically like the second coming.
Yes, I am glad that the one shout out to New Zealand that was featured in this comic is just like a crazy person.
Yeah.
who thinks that was Tom is like,
coincidentally looks like Alan Moore, but that's just because any, haggard, massively long-haired and bearded individual is probably going to end up looking kind of like Alan Moore.
Well, I assume he was based off The Wizard, which is down in where's is he in Christchurch? No, he used to be in Christchurch, but he moved after the earthquake. Anyway, he used to be a wizard in Christchurch, like a wizard.
Yes,
like beard and robes and all that kind of stuff. So I assumed that was kind of what he was basing it off.
Okay.
Come to New Zealand, we have wizards.
Be a wizard, yes.
Yeah. But anyway, what did I actually think of issue 1?
Yes.
Yeah, it was. It was fine.
Yeah,
it was fine. I was getting real Fables vibes from this.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
I do know what you mean.
Kind of the vibe. You do know what I mean? Well, because you've also read it. So
yes. No, yeah. I mean, I agree with you is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I was getting real Fables vibes. Like it was interesting, like what was kind of happening in the Q&A, and it was like, is Tommy really his father's son and that kind of thing. But I think at this point, I didn't care enough about Tommy. I didn't care enough about Tom, rather, to really like get super invested in what was going on. I think if I was getting this monthly, this would probably be one of the series that I would read the first issue and be like, and I'd probably get the second one because I'm too lazy to cancel it. But like, I wouldn't finish it and go, oh my God, I can't wait to get the second one.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is that to me at least, and I say this as someone who loves like fantasy, the very, very start where like Tommy Taylor is facing off against Ambrosio and there's like he's going to play the final note on the golden trumpet. I found that way more interesting than the other stuff that was
found
going
the
on.
Fake Harry Potter to be more interesting than the actual comic.
Yep. At this stage at least.
Okay.
What do you think of the first one?
I'm always a little turned off when something is that closely paralleled, like where it's like the joke in The Simpsons that I was referencing before was the Sherry Bobbins episode where it's like fake Mary Poppins and she's like, no, I'm an original character like Ricky Rouse or Monald Muck, and I'm just like, this is what that feels like to me. Because you can be like, this we're implying is this thing, and this doesn't even imply it, just wholesale is Harry Potter. I mean, like the name of it is even like the same cadence and everything, which I'm like, okay, I get it. Yeah. It's kind of like how anytime we've read horror, there's like a character named Lovecraft or a town named Lovecraft. And I want to throw the comic into the toilet when they do that because I'm like, we get it. Okay. Stop banging it over our heads. So that I have strong feelings about this
beating
sort of
you
thing.
Over the head with the book.
So, but because it was suggested by Patreon and it's suggested by a good friend of mine, as well, I was like, well, clearly there's more to this than what the first issue has led us to believe. So that's good. So going into it knowing that, I'm like, okay, I'm willing to give it a chance, because one thing that doing this podcast has really shown me is it takes about the first 3 issues for a lot of these series to really get their legs. So I think it's only fair to kind of give them a little more time, I think, than they're trying to set up a lot of stuff. The only thing that bothered me was how it was just wholesale Harry Potter. Like, it was not changed that much at all.
No, he even has like a girl and a boy who follow him around and do stuff with him.
Right.
And I honestly can't remember what their names are. They may as well have been of like Hermione and Bon or something.
Yeah, so I think it was like Peter really and Hermione. Yeah.
Peter and Hermione.
Also, Pullman, I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be a Philip Pullman reference or if it's just a name they thought sounded interesting. He's the author of his Dark Materials trilogy.
Yeah.
They're better than Harry Potter. Anyway, so that'll bring us into issue 2. They are, though. So do you want to take issue 2?
I will. I'll take issue 2. I'll hitch that horse and ride into the sunset. So Tom leaves the hospital as quietly as he can, which honestly isn't that quiet considering, large literary figure blown up by a nail bomb. His agent wants him to hide out under an assumed name, Sanders, also a literary reference. Yeah,
Colonel Sanders. I get it.
Did you say Colonel Sanders?
Yeah, Colonel Sanders. I get the reference.
Yeah. The famous chicken author.
He has that famous recipe that is a secret. Only the Illuminati know the 12 herbs and spices.
Wow. But Tom is determined to find out what is going on. His first port of call, University College, where he asks for Lizzie, is less than successful. So he heads for his plan B, but not before Mr. Pullman begins to tail him. Meanwhile, the long-awaited 14th Tommy Taylor book arrives mysteriously at the publishers. Tom arrives at Sue's house, a woman who knew his parents by way of an affair with his father. He asks if his mother was real, and she says yes. He asks if his parents are really his parents, and she says, Instead, she sends him into the basement and tells him to count the steps. On the way down, there are over 1,000, but only 12 on the way back up. What? Thoroughly confused, Sue tells Tom to go to Villa Diodati in Switzerland. Apparently, his dad's old housekeeper was the last to see him alive, and there may be clues there. After Tom leaves, Mr. Pullman arrives and threatens Sue, saying that this will be Tommy's last adventure. Tommy arrives at... Yeah, pretty much. Tommy arrives at the villa, having bored the ever-loving shit out of his cab driver. As he's peering into the house...
usually it's the other way around, but continue.
Yeah. It's so funny. He actually says to him at one point, because he knows a lot of literary history about locations and things like that. And he's kind of rattling the stuff off to the cab driver. And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, am I boring you?" And the cab driver's like, "I'm not even listening to you. I just want to go back to town."
And see, if that were me and someone responded with that, I would just say, "That's fair."
I would say, "That's fair," and then just continue talking anyway.
Yeah.
So Tommy arrives at the villa, having bored the ever-loving shit out of his cab driver. As he's peering into the house, he runs into Lizzie and discovers that he now has the Tommy Taylor tattoo on his hand.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun. Jonah, what do you think of issue 2?
So issue 2, I liked how it got weird, because, if you're gonna write a book with, Barry Botter in it, you might as well make it super weird, right? So the scene where he goes down the stairs and it shows this crazy spiraling staircase that just goes on forever. That part I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
And then there was
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And then the whole Pullman showing up, and we see that they've shown it I think once before, where he has one arm that's all jacked up. It's like a weird robot arm, but he can basically turn things to this weird gray mush with it. which I'm assuming is some sort of unwriting of them. Like he's maybe using some unwritten power, which I mean, I don't know. That seems to be the thing. And,
I made a really dramatic face and then it occurred to me this is a podcast. So nobody saw that.
So that was interesting. Like the cliche of the thuggish guy who's like, and this is going to be your face, and like does something with his powers, I guess. I don't know. It was weird. I'll just say it was weird. Yeah. There's also a scene where like he, as a kid, walks in on his dad, like just beating the hell out of a guy.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Which was really weird. Like there's these juxtaposed parts that are like super dark about his dad. So it's like, it's kind of intriguing. Like I'm kind of wanting to know what the hell is going on. So I have to say issue 2 definitely drew me in more than 1 did.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I think this kind of the point where like the weirdness steps up, the mystery becomes a little more engaging. And it's now kind of like, oh, I'm along with the mystery with you now. I'm kind of interested in what is happening as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was definitely a little more on board, from issue 2. I would say. I don't know if I necessarily like enjoyed it more than issue 1, but I was definitely more like interested in it. Yeah. Do you want
that's the ticket.
To grab? That's the ticket. Do you want to take issue 3?
Yes, I do. So, we open with a like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein scene. I actually thought the Frankenstein's monster looks pretty cool in this comic because he has that more just a huge dude, but he's all like, got the stitched up chest and head and everything. I'm like, that's actually a pretty simple, but really effective design for him. I liked it. But he also has kind of like the desiccated skin on his face where he kind of has like almost a mummy-ish look to his face, even though he's like this 8-foot tall brute. But yeah, that scene, I'm like, I don't know where this is going yet, but I'm intrigued by Frankenstein's monster being in this all of a sudden. But it turns out it's all because there's this, horror writers workshop that takes place in this villa. And, we see that there was like all these different writers that are in the kind of the genre of like fantasy and horror and stuff like that. But it takes place at supposedly this famous house this villa where all these other writers, which is where the Frankenstein thing came in, supposedly, where like Mary Shelley like wrote Frankenstein, or at least parts of it. So there's like connections to other famous works, which is why it opens with that. But, we get to meet all these different writers, and including this super douchey guy who doesn't really understand the genre at all, but thinks he's awesome. So he's going to live through the entire series and be fine, because that's usually what happens, right? So they all argue, and upstairs Tom is trying to wash the tattoo off. But of course it's magic. It doesn't come off. I'm assuming it's magic considering it just randomly appeared on his hand. That doesn't usually happen unless magic's involved, or if you're very, very drunk and then wake up with a tattoo you didn't know you got.
Super duper clumsy.
And,
oh no, I fell into this tattoo needle like 400 times.
Yeah. And then, he does the classic thing of getting mad and punching a mirror. Haven't we all? Lizzie tells him everything happens for a reason and he needs to learn about stories. The workshop takes a break and 2 of the writers propose a threesome with Tommy, but Lizzie shuts it down pretty quick. It's definitely a choice that was made in this story.
Yes, I did not understand it.
So after thinking about it for about 2 seconds, Tommy concludes that maybe his dad's private office contains something. Because if I don't think I mentioned before, this villa is also one of the places his dad was writing. So all these connections to various popular works of fiction and fantasy, especially. So his private office is in there, and but when he tries to get in, there's no doorknob, so he can't actually open the door to it. Lizzie says she can feel vibrations coming from the office, and she kisses Tommy's hand and then runs away. Meanwhile, out in the barn that's on the property, one of the threesome writers bangs a spliff and runs into Mr. Pullman. While Tommy is investigating a painting his dad was obsessed with, Mr. Pullman kills the writer with a scythe. Inside the safe is a letter from Tommy's dad telling him to use what he taught him,
also the doorknob.
Oh, and the doorknob is also in there. You're right. And what he taught him, as they've mentioned a few times, is like a map that just has like, hey, this book was either like written here or referenced this place or whatever. But it's like all these literary works, but he's not actually teaching him like what the book's about. It's more about like, this is where it was written, where it takes place.
Here's facts about it.
Yeah, which is weird. So that's the stuff he was prattling on about in the taxi that the guy was in the boring. Cab, yeah. So that's about the long and short of issue 3. Kieran, what did you think of issue 3?
God, I don't even really know where to start. So I enjoyed it. I didn't have any objection to reading or anything, but like the threesome thing was really weird. And
was it just there to be edgy?
It was just odd. Like it didn't have a
point.
No, there was nothing. There was nothing to suggest any of that.
This whole group just seems to be there to be like, aren't writers weird?
Yeah, pretty much. And as we'll discover later, to be like, whoa, aren't we all clumsy and getting murdered and stuff? Which, fine, whatever. And then like Lizzie, like feeling vibrations and then kissing his hand and then running away. It was very odd. It was very, very strange. So there are some things that I was pretty cool with about in this issue, like the kind of investigating the villa a bit more, but it was kind of unbalanced by some of the other stuff that I was like, this is a little too odd for me. I think maybe I wanted more kind of investigating and like finding stuff out and actually like getting something out of this mystery rather than what is basically an issue of Tommy wandering around this house being kind of annoyed, Lizzie being weird, and the writers like
being horny,
being horny. Yeah. So, this issue was fine. Like I was like, I may as well read the next one, but I think if I was getting it monthly, this would probably be the point that I would be drafting up an email saying, I'd like to make some amendments to my subscription.
Ah, fair. Yeah. I think 2 was a better issue. 2 was more interesting. Like you said, it had more of the mystery. And this one, it's like, there's the mystery of the door that they solve immediately and then are like, hey, I know the code. And he tries all these pretty obvious ones. And the password to the safe is pretty obvious to anyone who's a fan of the book, because it's just like the note progression of the trumpet thing from the book. So it's like, yeah, any of the super fans could have figured out how to get into this guy's safe, but they don't necessarily have access to this weird villa that's in the middle of nowhere. So, it's probably fine. Yeah. But yeah, the character behavior was super weird. Like, I guess we don't know that character that well. The one that kisses his hand. So I guess it's like, I'd say it's out of character, but I guess we don't really know Lizzie yet. So it's like, whatever. Yeah. But like all the stuff with the other writers, I'm like, it just kind of bored me. Like, I don't care about any of these characters, and I know they're just going to get killed off in like 2 seconds anyway. So I'm not invested. Like, I could just see it coming. Like, okay, these characters are literally here just to be murdered. So why am I spending 10 pages reading about their dumb fiction?
Yeah, like there's a whole bunch of pages where they're all sitting around talking like about the horror genre, but like it was coming from characters that I didn't care about, so it just felt kind of masturbatory. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong, a bit of literary masturbation can be great, but sure, I just didn't really care about it. And you were talking about like knowing that they were going to die. Like, I think like the last page of the comic is literally Pullman outside with a giant scythe. And it's like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure I can predict what's going to happen.
Shrakoom, says the onomatopoeia. Yeah, and Pullman is one of those characters where I'm like, the murder machine is here. So that's what this character's whole purpose is.
Pretty much, yeah.
I hope they can dig a little deeper with him at some point, because that kind of character does nothing for me nowadays. So, all right.
He sure loves killing, and he's real angry.
Mm-hmm. All right. You want to take us into issue 4?
I shall.
Get more into these amazing characters that we've just met and who are going to have long and interesting lives.
A couple of the writers find Tommy Taylor snuff fan fiction and are properly disturbed. And so was I. I didn't understand why this was here.
Thanks. I hate it, was what I was thinking when I read that page.
Pretty much. Meanwhile, upstairs, the facilitator for the workshop confesses that she is, in fact, the old housekeeper and begs Tommy to not go into his dad's study. Lizzie ignores this and bundles them both into the room. While they search the room, Stanley, who's the threesome writer, he arrives at the door. Or rather, his bleeding corpse. Whoa!
Okay. This one panel I found incredibly hilarious, because when he falls over, you see there's a scythe in his back, but then it pulls back to reveal that it's a smaller scythe, and Pullman actually has an even bigger scythe in his hand.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was meant to be funny, but I could not stop laughing when I saw that. I'm like, comedy gold, you've done it
again. You know what's funnier than a scythe? A bigger scythe.
The fact that it was like almost a fake out of like, oh, remember how he had that scythe? Well, this is a small scythe and he has this. I mean, it is they're both in the other panel, to be fair, but it was just the way it was framed. It was like, I don't know why it made me laugh so much. I think it was because it was supposed to be shocking, but it failed to be so. So it just made it funny.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So Mr. Pullman, obviously, as we discussed, he arrives at the villa with a scythe. Absolute shenanigans ensue, and Mr. Pullman kills the other threesome rider with a scythe, an old man with a gas hob, and the housekeeper slits her own throat. Classic. But meanwhile, Tom finds some kind of literary map detailing where stories have touched the real world. He and Lizzie leave the office while Mr. Pullman kills yet another writer. Tommy heads downstairs without Lizzie like a massive dickhead and finds the snuff writer tied to a clock with a broken back. This is the guy who didn't really understand the horror genre. Before he can help him, however, Mr. Pullman shows up, mentions that he's actually tried to kill his father before, and tosses him the housekeeper's severed head. As Mr. Pullman points a gun at Tommy, the head dissolves. Into words? What? Mr. Pullman holds the gun to Tommy's head and, oddly, doesn't kill him. Instead, he knees him in the head and allows him to be arrested for killing all the writers. As Tom is dragged away, he sees the winged cat Mingus on a tree, something that only existed in his father's books.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. So what did you think of this issue?
I didn't like it, because it was just a murder spree, and like I said, it wasn't interesting to me. It was just like, okay, all these characters I knew were about to get killed are getting killed, so that's cool. The best part of this was him accidentally dropping and breaking his dad's World Greatest Dad mug. That I thought was hilarious as well, because it was just so stupid and random. Because it had hot coffee in it still, so it was like another part of the whole mystery of like how it's tied into everything, all the weird book related stuff going on. So he picks up the cup and it's hot. It's full of hot coffee. And I don't know why. I just thought that was so funny. Again, something that was, I guess, supposed to be shocking that I just found hilarious.
I did understand what they were trying to go for with that one, but I was like,
sure.
Why is it a World's Greatest Dad mug? I don't know. It's like that detail stuck in my brain more than anything else.
But I don't know, the whole murder spree thing, like, now, don't get me wrong. I've watched my share of Friday the 13th's and Freddy Krueger's and all those, and I don't mind a good
Freddy Krueger.
Yes. I don't mind a good, slasher movie or something, just, for the dumb fun of how bad those are. But like, I was expecting this to not be that. Like, I thought it was going to be more of a weird mystery with fantasy elements, and it does have that kind of, but in this first 4 issues, it kind of just gives you a little bit of a taste. So, I just didn't do it for me.
I find it really interesting that they had, because one of the writers is basically like, he says, I write torture porn. He's the one who like they all say he doesn't understand the genre. And then Tommy finds him later with his back broken, like tied to a clock kind of thing. So it's like, he's hoisted upon his own petard. But it's really funny that he's presented as like, he doesn't get horror, and he's like, it's all about the guts spraying everywhere and like, knives and, bone saws and things like that, and like that sort of shit. And he's presented as like, he doesn't understand it. He's a hack, and, what he writes is not really worth anything. Mm-hmm. And horror is more about, the meeting of different forces within the mind, and, kind of examining, our kind of societal and personal fears and things like that. So, the story obviously understands the genre and presents a case for why that style of horror is not good. Mm-hmm. And then just proceeds to do that.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, it's like, look, this is how you do it, shit. And then just does it anyway. And it's like, that doesn't make it particularly clever or anything.
Pointing out the thing that you're doing is bad because you understand, isn't this funny? Because it's just as dumb as this guy's dumb thing. Doesn't make it not bad too. Like, exactly. Games have that problem a lot. Like, there are games that have genuinely funny dialogue and moments and stuff like that. But then there's a few games out there that are like, isn't it funny how this trope is in games and it's also in our game, but we're pointing out that it's in our game? And it's like, no, it's still not fun to play, even if your main character is pointing out that it's dumb.
Yes.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. It's like, wow, doing this task is really boring and tedious. It's like, no, it's just boring and tedious.
Yeah.
I don't care that you've pointed it out. It's still bad. So yeah, I found that kind of interesting that they were perfectly willing to like deconstruct what they were doing as bad, and they just did it anyway. So, and I mean, and that kind of summarizes my feelings about this particular issue. I was just like, same as you. I was like, I just don't really care that all these people are dying. And there wasn't enough of Tommy and Lizzie doing the mystery stuff.
Yeah, that could have been a lot cooler if it had been like, even if they had shown up to the house and it was abandoned, like, that would have been cooler than whatever the hell this was.
Yeah, and I know that the end of the story, he sees, so the winged cat, Mingus, is from the book. It's the Hedwig, basically. And it's supposed to be like it's weird that it's shown up, but there hasn't been really anything else to kind of suggest that this is like a big reveal or anything. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of felt like, and now there's a cat.
Right.
And I mean, I'm not objecting. I like cats, but from a story point of view, I was like, I don't really care. You haven't given me any kind of anchor point for this.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then we didn't do a summary of issue 5 per se, but it is kind of a lore-based issue. So I did kind of want to talk about it a bit.
You can say that I didn't do it because I didn't want to.
That's fair. No, I don't want that in the show. So because issue 5 was kind of like a weird offshoot thing, we didn't like write a normal summary, but it basically it shows how Mark Twain and some other famous writers from that era kind of are meeting about, this. There's like this secret society, and they're getting famous writers to write specific stories that will influence kind of the world around them and stuff. And it's Rudyard Kipling is the writer that they are basically targeting, because they're like, oh, your adventure stories about colonialism are really helping our colonialism throughout the world. So keep doing that. And basically how it kind of takes over his life and how he regrets like all this terrible stuff. And then when he tries to get away from it, they kind of make threats on him and his family. And, then the big reveal is like, you know, his daughter dying young. It was actually Pullman the whole time. Like he's been around forever. So there's like connections with, the Pullman and the whole whatever magical power he has about, you know, having a murder arm and stuff like that with some of these famous stories. And, it was interesting. Like, I actually found some of that weird lore stuff a little more interesting, I think, than some of the stuff in the actual book proper, which is probably not a good sign. So I guess we'll get into our final thoughts on the volume. Kieran, do you want to take us away?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Okay. I wish this was worse. To be honest, I wish this was, I wish this was worse, because then I could have fun, like shitting on it and being like, yeah, but it's really bad. I'd never read this. Fucking hate this bullshit. This is very average.
Yeah.
Which is so hard to like, it's so hard to review. I find something that's very average as opposed to something that's very good or very bad, because like, I don't feel any desire to rip into this and say that it's terrible and that, you know, everyone should stay away from it. But equally, I feel literally no desire to read any more of it or tell anyone else to. If the concept sounds interesting to you, yeah, give it a go. But, unless you have a free ex-library copy sitting on your bookshelf that your ex-girlfriend left on your bookshelf, I wouldn't really bother, to be honest. I wasn't that invested in the story that was going on. There was too much dumb stuff in it. And I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I thought the art was incredibly average. There was a lot of like really interesting fantasy concepts and things like that just weren't presented very well. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, this is kind of the thing. It was fine. It was fine.
Yeah.
And that's really like my overall verdict, is that it was fine. Yeah. If you do read it, you're not going to like regret it or anything. No, but equally, if you don't read it, you're not going to regret that either. Mm-hmm. So yeah, a lukewarm microwaved recommendation.
Fair. Yeah.
Jonah, what did you think?
So here's the thing. If you are in a country, unlike Kieran, that has Comixology Unlimited, sorry, Kieran, volumes 1 through 3 are on there. So yeah, give it a shot. See if it's your thing, because most people I know like Fables, and it reminded me a hell of a lot of Fables, which I don't like at all, as our review came out like at the beginning, one of our early episodes of this podcast. So in that vein, yeah, wasn't for me. Like, I can see why people like it. Like, but I think he made, from a writing standpoint, I think, having read volume 2 as well, he could have cut 80% of what was in volume 1 and jumped to the stuff that's actually way more interesting in volume 2. And then I would have been much more on board, because it's like they start using like the magical doorknob that they find at the very end of this one, and they have to do a jailbreak, and there's all this crazy crap that happens. It's like you could have probably condensed all of this into maybe like one or an issue or an issue and a half, and then gotten into that weird magical stuff that's much more interesting.
Right.
I also like, there's the tropey as hell thing of using literary characters of other people's in your own thing. And that can be done in interesting ways. I'm not saying it's not. And even like, cause like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is an example of something where the books were incredibly popular. It's my understanding. I've read volumes 1 and 2 way back in the day. And they use a bunch of like famous literary characters and stuff. It's weird to have a famous literary character that still feels new to me. 'Cause like, yes, Harry Potter's been out forever, right? But at least to some people, like to younger people who are listening to this, like you grew up with those characters. So they've just always kind of been there for you. But to someone like me, who's a little bit older, it's being one of the biggest phenomenon that I saw, like, as an adult, going, someone at the library where I worked at the time going, I think this book's going to be big someday. And then having it become like the biggest franchise in the world was kind of interesting to see. So it's weird to pull that of all things and be like, this is my version of what if Harry Potter was in the real world. It's just weird. Like, how can you get away with this? Like I said, legally distinct enough.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's just a thing I personally get I don't even know why it annoys me so much. It just does. And he as a character just wasn't interesting enough was the problem, I think, as a lead.
Yeah.
Like, he was just so bland. Like, he brought nothing to the table. It kind of felt like if Lizzie hadn't been there to, like, drag him by the nose hairs through this plot, like, nothing would have ever happened in this story.
Yeah.
So, not a big recommend from me personally. But like I said, if the concept of this, like, what if Harry Potter were real and that kind of spills over the magic into the real world thing, sounds interesting to you, and you have Comixology Unlimited, like, yeah, check out the first couple volumes, because I don't think volume 1 does nearly as good of a job as, like, world building and stuff until that last issue. That's like Mark Twain hanging out with Rudyard Kipling and being like, isn't it weird that there's this secret society that's trying to use authors to manipulate the world? And I'm like, just write that comic. What the hell? So anyway, that's my opinion. Strong recommend for reading Mark Twain. No, but I think that's going to bring us to an end. So I think this might be one of our shortest episodes ever.
I think so.
So Kieran, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Mr. K_Bennett. You can also check out my D&D podcast, which is for Crits and Giggles. That's at for CNG podcast on Twitter. Jonah, where can people find you?
Oh man, you can find me on Twitter at Spambot, and also streaming things for our patrons at twitch.tv/inksandissues. Need more mutants, metahumans, and monsters in your life? Then check out these other Geekly Inc. shows like Transformation Sequence, Cthulhu and Friends, and Drunks and Dragons. Help us make the show the best that it can be by supporting us at patreon.com/inksandissues, where you can get bonus content, early access to episodes, and can even vote on comics for us to review. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review to help us spread the word. Interact with us on Twitter at inksandissues, or on Twitch at twitch.tv/inksandissues. Now do yourself a favor and go read some gosh dang comics. So with that, we will see you all next time. Goodbye.
Bye. I love you. So I'll start that paragraph again. Logan, cut that whole thing out. Don't even put it in the bloopers. It's not even funny. It's just me not being able to read, which is a tragedy more than anything.